So good afternoon, everyone. It's Tim Elkington here from the IB. Thank you very much for coming along to our latest weekly Wednesday webinar, which is one of the things that we're obviously doing to keep in touch with you guys during the lockdown. Today, we're going to have a look at the Adspend results for the full year 2019. But before we get into that, let me just give you a kind of quick intro into some of the stuff that we're doing. Yep, it's Tim here, the Chief Digital Officer at the IB. Steph, if you could whiz on to the next slide. So one of the things we've sort of tried to do during these webinars is to make them a little bit interactive. So hopefully we've got some polls for you. And just to test if the poll functionality is working, we've got a very important question about haircuts. So during the lockdown, obviously people are having to do stuff sort of slightly differently. So the question is, which you should be able to see on screen, have you had a haircut or cut someone else's hair during the lockdown? So hopefully you can see that. And if you can't see it, maybe we can try it again. Yes, people can see it. So we'll give you a second just to vote. So in the interest of transparency, about 45% of people have had a haircut or cut someone else's hair. 19% no, but actually interestingly, 36% say no, they haven't, but they need one. So maybe that number will creep up as we keep going. So thank you for participating in that poll, just to kind of get things going. And if we can whiz on to the next slide. So what we're doing today is part of something that we're doing to kind of keep you all connected with us during the lockdown. So there's a whole load of things that we're doing as part of IB Connected. Obviously today is one. And I can tell you about a few other things. So really excitingly, the IB UK podcast has become the IB UK Connected podcast while we're in lockdown. And whereas we used to do it every other week, we're pretty much doing a podcast every day at the moment. Today's podcast is really excellent. It's with the effectiveness guru, Peter Field. It's well worth a listen. It's about 40 minutes long. And if technology is our friend, we should be able to play you a very quick clip of Peter talking right now.
The first response in New Zealand earlier this week, as they went from level 4 to level 3, was queues outside coffee shops and McDonald's. And this is what you're seeing: huge pent-up demand. In Denmark, queues outside hair salons. So there is all of these product categories, and that demand hasn't gone away yet. That's why we're different. It's a V-shaped. It's going to get very bloody for a quarter or perhaps two. We know that. The numbers do look bad, but people just have to remember that the upside should be equally steep. And it's the businesses that can preserve their capabilities, preserve their people, and preserve their brands for that upside that are the ones that will do best.
So that's hopefully a really useful example of the podcast. You can get the podcast from the sort of usual channels, or you can go to the IB site. One of the other things we're doing, in addition to the Wednesday weekly webinar, is we can also come and present to your teams virtually. So we've got a menu of 9 presentations that go from everything from some research, for example, around effectiveness or attention, the latest on the gold standard, how to get the most out of your membership. And again, if you go to the connected area of the site, you'll be able to have a look at the list, get in touch with us, and we'd love to do some sort of virtual presentations to your team. So do give us a shout if that is something that you'd like to take up. And then finally, really importantly, obviously at this time of year is usually the time of year where we would do our flagship event, IAB Engage. We obviously can't do a physical event this year, but what we are doing is we're going to ask you to stay engaged through the whole of May with a number of sort of special audio sessions. So we're going to have a special podcast every day during the month of May. Details are up on the site already. You can sign up, you can get some more information, and we're going to be having a whole load of interesting things, from keynotes to deep dive interviews to some panel discussions. You can get a notification about what's coming up every day, and hopefully, even though we can't be engaged in a physical way at our usual event, we will be able to stay engaged through these special audio sessions. So do look out for those coming really soon. One of the other things we've been doing is we've been trying to highlight some of the great work that our members have been doing during the lockdown, and I'm going to pass over to my colleague Hebe, who's just going to highlight a couple of those for you.
Hello, thank you, Tim. I'm from the marketing team here at IAB UK, and if you've been coming along for the past few weeks, you'll be familiar with what the next few minutes entails. I'll be sharing some of the many ways our members have adapted to new ways of working during the COVID-19 outbreak, fun ways in which teams have stayed connected, and exciting new initiatives our members have created to help support our industry. So first up, we all find ourselves turning to the news a lot more than normal during these uncertain times. But does this increase in visitor time on news organisations translate in direct revenue? You would think so, but no, due to blacklisting. Blacklisting is a simplistic brand safety tactic that blocks ads based on keywords appearing in URLs or nearby content. So with more than 3,000 advertisers blocking the word coronavirus, what does this mean for publishers? Oracle Data Cloud support the vital efforts of news publishers to inform the public, and in their latest blog discuss how advertisers need to support these news organisations. They've also developed an advanced contextual intelligence tool to help both advertisers and publishers understand and evaluate during COVID-19. Definitely worth a look at. And up next, there's a lot of uncertainty for everyone across the globe during the outbreak. But what about graduates? For many grads, they are probably feeling unsure on how and if they can get a job come September, and where to put their best foot forward in terms of applying, which is why the Programmatic Advisory has created a programme looking to help graduates get a job in the industry through practical training. They have teamed up with Sphere Digital Recruitment, who will refund the course fee for anyone who attends and successfully is placed by them. The theory being they think this programme and certificate will hold them in really good stead for their future in the industry. The course runs from the 11th to the 15th of May, and there's more details on our site. And finally, there have been many developments over the last few weeks on supporting small businesses. And it's no surprise that the role of social media platforms are coming to the forefront during these times of social distancing. Facebook have launched a business support hub to help small businesses grow resilience and ride out the outbreak's economic fallout, from guidance on serving communities as well as tips on staying connected with their customers. If you'd like to find out more on any of the stuff that I've talked about today, it's all over on our Connected Hub. And if you'd like to get involved, just drop myself or Rachel an email. That's it from me. Back over to Tim.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that, Hebe. So just a couple of really important things before I hand over to the research team. The first one is to say that if you have any questions while we're presenting the 2019 Adspend results, please use the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen, and then we'll get to those questions at the end. The second thing that's really important is that obviously the data we're talking about at the moment is for the full year 2019, so it's very much pre-COVID data. So the situation we're in at the moment looks quite different to the situation we're about to talk about on screen. So one of the things that we've done really recently is a survey actually of all of our paid for members, of which 53 were able to help us out, that had a look at the impact of the COVID crisis. And what we found was that average revenue for our members that completed the survey had declined by 11% in March 2020 versus 2019, and that forecasts for Q2 2020 compared to Q2 2019 on average were down 32%. So you can see it's having a really serious impact on people's revenues this year. We found that actually smaller businesses were sort of seeing a greater impact than larger businesses. The way that we did the survey is we sent one email out per company. So if you want to know more about that, or if you didn't get the email, or you want to know who in your company did get involved, then do email me and I can help with that. It's just tim@iabuk.com. So do please bear in mind when the research team are talking through the results that they very much apply to last year, and the situation this year is obviously quite different. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to the research team, who are going to talk you through the 2019 Adspend results.
Oh, great, thanks, Tim. So yeah, Elizabeth, Hannah and I from the research team are going to talk through the 2019 Adspend results that we published yesterday for the next 20 minutes or so. So first of all, I just want to start with a bit of background to the study so that everyone is on the same page. So the Adspend study is used by the Advertising Association as the official measure of the size of the digital ad market in the UK, and has been since we first started measuring it in 1997. We now conduct the full study annually, and we work with PwC to produce this. And we have Mike and Adam from PwC on the webinar now, so they'll be able to help with any kind of PwC specific questions if you have any. It's worth noting that the study looks at spend on media space only in order to be comparable with other channels. So this means that kind of no commissions or third-party fees are included in these figures that we're going to talk through. And by total digital, we're currently referring to spend on desktop, tablet and smartphone only, so other devices are not currently included in the scope of the study. And finally, kind of in terms of kind of what the study does, it gives us all kind of a view of the size of the overall digital ad market in the UK, as well as kind of where the growth and major trends are by formats. So hopefully really useful for your companies to kind of compare individual company revenues to, as well as kind of have a view of digital format trends, which can be used in your own kind of sales arguments and pitches as well. So to give an overview of how we get this data, we basically conduct them with 3 steps. So first of all, we receive confidential submissions. So this year we received submissions from 58 participants who kind of fill in a submission form with all their revenues for the different categories and formats that we break out. And we also get kind of additional recruitment site figures and TV broadcast figures provided by Walk as well. And then we model any companies or any large companies that are not included in the direct submissions. So you can see some of the logos of some of the companies that we model in addition there. And this slide just shows all the people who submitted directly to the study. So a big thank you to everyone who took part. We know it's kind of a time-consuming form to fill out, and we really appreciate it. And we couldn't split out all the detail in the report without the help from everyone. And then finally, we run these all the model figures past our advisory board of major agencies and analysts who kind of so we can ensure kind of the numbers that we're seeing are kind of in line with the growth that they're seeing going through their platforms as well. So again, thank you to these companies for their contribution. It really helps us kind of ensure that the figures we publish are kind of accurately representing as much of the market as possible. And before going into the figures, I just want to recap on last year. So last year, the total market was at, or 2018, the total market was at 13.6 billion. The eagle-eyed among you, you might notice this is slightly different to the figure we published last year. So just so you know, we often make restatements for previous year's figures as kind of new data points become available. So we're working with the most accurate data that we have. So now for the headline results. So for 2019, the total market figure was 15.69 billion. This is an increase of 2.09 billion year on year, and an absolute growth rate of 15.4%. So it's a really big milestone to see spend go over the 15 billion mark for the first time. And if we look at that in comparison to GDP, quarterly GDP for 2019 peaked at 0.7% in Q1 2019. And at its lowest, it was minus 0.2%, I think, in Q3. So digital advertising, as you can see, far outstripped the UK economy as a whole. And as Tim already mentioned, we just want to reiterate that we're aware how different the kind of economic climate is in April 2020 compared to 2019, and that a 15.4% increase last year might not reflect the 2020 outlook for many. But the growth areas we see within the report will still be important reminders of where the growth opportunities are, so that when your businesses are making important decisions of where to invest budget, it's based on the most accurate data possible. So basically, we encourage you to kind of focus not necessarily on the positive high numbers reflected in 2019, more on what kind of the overall story is saying. Last year, we introduced this new chart, which shows on the left, you can see the total market, so 15.69 billion, split by the largest 5 companies and the rest of the market. So you can see the largest 5 companies by revenue make up 77% of the total market and grew at just under 20% year on year, which you can see in the figures on the right. And the rest of the market, so the remaining 23%, stands around 3.6 billion and grew a more modest 2%, but still showed positive growth. There's obviously large variation within that. Out of the remaining companies, we saw just under 2/3 reported positive year-on-year growth, kind of highlighting the opportunities in the market outside of those top 5. To save a bit of time on questions, if anyone was going to ask, we can't identify who the top 5 are. So this report is aggregate figures only, and kind of saying those top 5 companies is the most granular split we can give, I'm afraid. So going back to the total market, so we said that was 15.69 billion. So 8.82 billion of that was for smartphone specific advertising, with a much higher increase of 26.7 billion percent, which is an increase, which I've just circled, of 1.86 billion, which represents 89% of the total growth in digital advertising. So as with last year, almost all growth came from increased spend on smartphone. And then this chart here shows how the smartphone split of total digital has changed over time. So with smartphone at just 2% of total digital back in 2010, you can see a slight acceleration from 2015. It now stands at 56% of total digital spend in 2019, to kind of better reflect current device behavior, although there's still a bit of catching up to do. I'm now going to hand over to Hannah, who will give you a more detailed breakdown of the formats that make up the total digital market.
Thanks, Steph. So let's have a look at which formats make up the total and where the format trends are. It's worth saying at this point that the full report is on the IAB site, and it has many more cuts of the data than we're going to show you today due to time. So please do have a look at the full report when you can, and if you have any questions that you want to follow up with, you can get in touch with the research team. So on to the next slide. Yeah. If you have a look at how the £15.7 billion total breaks down into the top line categories, so as with previous years, paid for search remains the biggest share of the pie, and this time tips just over half of all digital at 51%. Digital display share has remained constant from last year at 39%. And classified, which we'll come back to later in the presentation, has lost some share since 2018. This picture is even clearer at the smartphone level, where the 2 categories make up 99%. So display taking up a much bigger share here than for total digital. So the chart you're looking at tracks the growth of the 3 top line categories over time. And you can see that in the last 4 years, search has almost doubled, growing from 4 billion in 2015 to 8 billion. And the rate of growth continues to be very high at 18% for search. Similarly, display shows a high growth rate, and we will look into where this growth comes from in more detail shortly. Classified has remained flat and actually loses some share this year with a decline of -4%. Now, looking at those categories individually for a moment, firstly, a brief look at search. So one interesting trend to pull out for search is how mobile search has grown in recent years. So back in 2013, mobile search revenue accounted for just 17% of digital search. And last year, in 2018, it tipped to just over half. And now in 2019, the majority of search revenue, so 55%, is through mobile. Let's now have a look at what's driving the growth in display. Again, it's interesting to pull out the proportion of display revenue that is smartphone. So back in 2013, smartphone specific display ads accounted for just 23% of overall display, and the rest would have been on desktop. The share doubled in 3 years, reaching 52% in 2016. And now you can see that 70% of display revenue comes from mobile. So this trend is driven by consumers spending more time on mobile, increased availability of data, and brands creating a rich, immersive experience for consumers within the mobile environment. And with the arrival of 5G, we don't expect to see this trend slowing anytime soon. So let's have a more detailed look at display and see what formats make up the £6.2 billion total. So in the orange, video formats make up the largest share of display and account for 46% of the total. So this includes mainly pre, mid, post-roll ads and outstream ads. It's an increase from 2018, with video creeping up its share slightly from 40%. So then the second highest category, banners, they account for 29% at £1.8 billion. So this includes static formats embedded on the web page, so things like leaderboards and skins. And then we have native formats, which account for a fifth of display. And by this, we mean ads that fit in with the look and feel of the content on the web page. So this figure is predominantly in-feed formats, but it also includes native distribution tools, such as more from around the web. Sponsored content, which is mainly online advertorials, makes up 3%. And then the rest of the market is made up of the smaller formats on the right in blue. Okay, so this chart shows all the formats again with the year-on-year growth rates included, and it shows you where the key growth areas are. So you can see that video has grown by 34%, which shown it's been one of our key drivers of that growth in display. And within mobile, the growth rate of video was slightly higher at 38%. Banners and native also grew by 7% and 9% respectively. I'm now going to hand over to Elizabeth, who's going to look a stage deeper into the data.
Thanks, Hannah. So yes, now we're going to go one level deeper into video subformats. So when looking at the split between pre, mid, post-roll and outstream, you can see here in the trend data that outstream started to overtake pre, mid, post-roll in 2016 and still sits ahead at 1.78 billion compared to 1.1 billion for pre, mid, post-roll. And what that means is that outstream itself has added £400 million in revenue since 2018. Looking at the data another way in terms of share, this means that outstream now makes up almost 2/3 of all video spend at 62%. This is a slight increase on its 2018 share of 61%, but it's broadly the same. Pre, mid, post-roll sits at 38%, with video other making up less than 1%. And video other includes things like video advertising attached to the video player itself. And then another data set we can look at is the broadcaster versus non-broadcaster split of the pre, mid, post-roll video. Here, we've seen a shift in 2019 towards non-broadcaster VOD, making up 58% of the share and representing over £600 million in spend. Comparatively, in 2018, the split was roughly even at 51% non-broadcaster and 49% broadcaster. Now, what we see here is that the key drivers of the swing, unsurprisingly, include things like YouTube, with increases in their year-on-year revenues. But as well as that, we've seen some increases for publishers and their video players in 2019. So this has resulted in the swing away from broadcaster VOD. We also receive supplementary data from SMI each year, which looks at data from 5 of the 7 UK media agencies. The full report available, which Hannah and Steph have mentioned before, shows the data split by display and then display into social and non-social and also search. But for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to show you the data for total display to end our section here on display advertising. So this is how the picture looks for total display. As the chart shows, the sectors making up display advertising is quite mixed, and there's no single category that completely dominated in 2019. Consumer goods and retail took the biggest shares, between them making up almost a quarter. But there are lots of other categories making up the pie, computer and software, automotive and clothing, for example, all taking at least 7% share each, which really goes to show that there's a broad opportunity for advertisers to monetize digital display advertising across a variety of categories. And it's worth saying that it'll be worth returning to these figures next year once we have the 2020 data, as we could well see some increases and decreases to some of these categories as the effect of COVID-19 on the industry play out. So now we'll look at social advertising and the trends for 2019. So as this chart shows, social has added a further £700 million spend to its 2018 figure at 3.59 billion in 2019. This is marks a milestone for social revenue, as it's now past the 3 billion figure. Social represents almost a quarter of all digital ad spend and has seen a 25% increase compared to last year, so really, really rapid growth. And in total, of the total display market, social makes up the majority now at 58%. And then once again, continuing our theme throughout this presentation, we see that smartphone is particularly dominant for social spend, making up 90% of the total. Smartphone has increased its share from 2018 by 2 percentage points, so only slight, but still an increase. Social on desktop and tablet, although it only makes up 10%, it did see growth from 2018 at 9%, but at a much slower rate than smartphone, which increased 27%. And finally, we'll now look at the top line classified figure before we summarise the Adspend report for 2019. So classified spend reached 1.3 billion in 2019, which, as Hannah has said previously, is a slight decline of minus 3.6% compared to the previous year and continues the slight annual decreases since 2016. Now, whilst we can't track drivers of change, we think that wider contextual trends give an indication of what might be happening here. So reasons might include the rise in listing via platforms such as Facebook or directly through Google and LinkedIn, and some of the structural issues facing sectors such as newspapers or automotive, recruitment and property, for example. And we also see the same trends in annual data that WARC produces. So we thought we would show you what some of the experts in the marketing industry have forecast for the year ahead, as we know it will be a tough time for many. Last week, the IPA brought out its annual bellwether report, and we're going to show you a couple of charts from it. So here on the left, you can see the trended data for total marketing budgets, showing clearly the decline from the financial crash in 2008 and the beginnings of a decrease for 2020. On the right-hand side, the bar chart shows current revisions to marketing budgets for 2020, broken down by different areas of marketing. What it shows is that revisions have been made in all areas, market research and events seeing particular dips in budget, but that overall the average marketing budget is down 6.1% this year. This isn't a particularly rosy picture, obviously, but it is worth pointing out that the IPA's Director General, Paul Bainsfair, has said that whilst these are tough times, the IPA predicts the worst effects to come in Q2 and that they hope to see a more upbeat end to the year. And in fact, the bellwether report has predicted a modest growth in 2020 and for things to pick up again in 2021. So let's hope that those forecasts do come to fruition. So that's the end of our presentation of Adspend 2019. There was a lot of information for you to take in. So if you leave today with only 5 pieces of information, it would be these key takeouts. So that the total UK digital advertising market in 2019 was worth 15.69 billion. That smartphone is driving almost all the growth in the market. Paid for search makes up 51% of the total digital market, the biggest chunk. Video is the largest display format at 46% and has seen a high growth rate of 34%. And then finally, Outstream now makes up 62% of all video spend. So thank you for taking time out to join us for this presentation. We hope you found the insights really useful. As I said before, if you had any questions for us or PwC, do use the Q&A function below. I'm now going to hand over to Tom, who's the IAB's Head of Marketing, who's going to take us through a live demo of our new Adspend Analyzer tool. And then after that, we should have time for questions. So Tom.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to try and seize the screen. One moment. Hopefully you should now all be able to see the IABUK.com homepage. So as Hannah said, there's only limited ways that we can kind of show you highlights, and what you've seen there is some of the headlines from the Adspend study this year, but really there are almost infinite cuts of the data when you think back to the fact that we've been measuring Adspend since 1998, when total UK ad spend totaled £8 million. So time has changed, and as we see people with more specialist roles and very specialist companies, we get increasingly more requests for specific cuts of the data that are relevant to the roles that people do or their clients. So this year we have launched the Adspend Analyzer, which is a new tool that allows you basically to chart the data that is most useful to you, your clients, and your role. You'll find it via the IABUK.com homepage, and if you scroll down to the Adspend Analyzer, click Explore Now, and then you can go through to the tool. I should say at this point, you will need to be logged in. So if this bar at the top says Login, this is a member-only tool. So for all IAB UK members, you can easily create an account, log in, and then you'll get access to the tool. And what this allows you to do is essentially cut the data over the last 23 years exactly in the most useful way for you. So for example, I will not labor the examples here, but if you wanted to see the last decade of data, this is full digital ad spend between 2010 and 2019. You can generate that chart. Hover states will show you the total value that you're looking for. And then you can also cut that down and show it filtered by, for example, paid for search versus display. And at any point show the total so you can see what you're comparing. And as I say, this data goes back 23 years, but you can choose whatever is most useful for you. You can also download any chart that you generate as JPEG, PNG, or PDF. And on the left-hand menu here, you'll see other formats that allow you to filter by whatever is most relevant to you. So for example, if video is your bag, you can search by video and then do a comparison of pre, mid, post versus outstream to give you that data that you need. Hover states, remember those, downloading the charts that are most useful for you to drop into your own decks. And if you scroll down, if there's any terminology that you're unclear of, either from the presentation that we've just given or from the Adspend Analyzer, then we've got a category and format help guide down here as well. Hopefully it's fairly self-explanatory. Honestly, the best way is just to dive in, start playing with it and see what is most useful for you. All of that data is in there. So it's really for our members to get the most out of it based on your own needs. But any questions, feel free to drop me an email directly, tom@iabuk.com, or feel free to ask questions on here. Thank you very much. I think I'm handing back to Steph. There we go.
Great, thanks, Tom. So it's Tim here again. And we do have a number of questions which we wanted to answer. So if you're still thinking of a question, do please use the Q&A tool to let us know what your question is. I'll actually take the first one before passing on to some colleagues. So Camilla asked, what was the percentage of digital ad spend of all ad spend in UK 2019? Actually, the data for that comes out tomorrow. So in the same way that members feed their revenue figures into us, we feed the total digital number into WARC and the Advertising Association, and then they're going to publish those numbers tomorrow. So you haven't got long to wait, Camilla. If you go to the Advertising Association website tomorrow, you'll get all the details on how the shares break down in 2019. So I think we've got some colleagues from PwC on the call with us. So I don't know, Michael, if you would like to come on and answer the remaining questions that we've got.
Hello.
Hello,
Hi, can you hear me? Yes, just checking. Sorry, checking you can hear me. Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Mark Phillips from PwC. So I helped pull the numbers together, working alongside the IAB. So yeah, so going through the Q&A questions. So the first question from Stephanie regarding the do these numbers include TikTok? So this is an interesting question. We in short, they don't, because we had discussions this year about new companies that we wish to model and factor into these numbers. However, when we spoke to the media agencies like the advisory board and also try to collect primary data, we were unable to kind of pull together a TikTok number. But it's something that we're looking to factor in and monitor over the next few years as the platform's growing. The next question, so regarding does the search revenue include Amazon? Yes, that's correct. We bucket Amazon's search features into these revenues that you see. On the next question, it is, are you placing outstream video into the video or native? So we place outstream video within the video category in this Adspend study.
Yeah, shall I take over to ask the other three? What the other two, Philip and Emma, have asked about the percentage traded programmatically. So we used to do the media owner sales technique study, which showed a percentage of display traded programmatically in terms of direct sales and indirect as well. So we stopped doing that study in 2018 as the percent traded programmatically got to around 80%. So we felt it was the majority of the market. So we haven't monitored that this year. We don't have figures for that. But in the most recent report that included that, we had some forecast figures going up to 2020, which predicted up to 95% of the market could be traded programmatically by that point. So yeah, we don't have any recent figures on that, but hopefully those forecasts are helpful.
Okay, thanks for that, Steph. So if you do have any questions that you think of after today, or you have a look at the data and you do have any questions, you can just email research@iabuk.com. So I'd like to say thanks a lot for joining today. I hope you found it really useful. We'll be back at the same time, same place next week. Next week, we're going to have a look at some research, the rules of effectiveness, that looks at how you can maximize your digital display activity for brand building. So thanks again, and do join us next week.